Today I'll be going into detail about my decision to purchase the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K in 2020. Did I get my money's worth? Why not the Pocket Cinema 6K or a competitor like the Panasonic GH5 or 5S series? Hopefully the answers to all these questions from my experiences will help you make a purchasing decision that's right for you. Hey guys, it's Joel here. So a quick backstory about my shooting style and gear history. I've been traveling and shooting on the Panasonic GH4 for the past 4 years. This has been the perfect camera for budget filmmaking on the go. I was able to travel through New Zealand, Australia, and most of Southeast Asia with this camera. So I definitely understand the importance of the saying, the best camera you have is the one you have on you. I think that's the saying. So when it came time to hang up my travel boots during the COVID crisis of 2020, I thought long and hard about my experience with the GH4 camera and what I was looking for in the current camera market. My biggest gripe with the Lumix GH4 was the lack of flexibility with color grading, not to mention the weird color casts I would get on skin tones and lack of details in my highlights and shadows. Vlog wasn't quite cutting it, and my PC hates the H.264 codec with a passion. For lenses, I've been using a mixture of native micro four thirds and EF mount APS-C lenses with an EF to micro four thirds Metabone speed booster. I've loved the flexibility of shooting off-speed handheld with the Lumix 12 to 35mm lens with built-in IS, and the bigger, bulkier Sigma 24 to 70mm for nicer focus pulling on tripod and slider shots. With this kit, my next natural step would have been to pick up the Panasonic GH5 or the GH5S, and this was my initial plan. The GH5 looked like an awesome upgrade with 10-bit 4K Vlog, 4K 60p, and a whole bunch of upgraded features. But after doing a lot of research, I decided that the extra work color correcting skin tones and likely experiencing similar problems in post as I did with the GH4, that the GH5 wasn't for me at this stage. Which brings me to application. So what am I mostly going to be shooting? And well, for me, my application is a lot of different stuff, from cinematic travel content to corporate interviews and events, short films and music videos. So no one camera is going to be the best at all of that. It's about using different tools for different projects. But my passion, or the want, is to be shooting cinematic content in the form of short films and features. I love striving for that cinema look, and so the Pocket 4K ticked all the boxes there for me. At a great price to dip my toes into professional filmmaking equipment. If you were to be shooting more documentary run and gun style filmmaking, the Lumix GH5 would be a great choice. It was a tough call, as I knew I would be missing out on a few features that other cameras have by going for the Pocket 4K, but here's why I decided to go for it in the end. Blackmagic Raw, the single biggest improvement I've seen in my footage has been from the video codec. Blackmagic Raw has a staggering 13 stops of dynamic range, which allows you to pull more detail from the highlights and shadows for a more cinematic looking image. I'm just at the start of my color grading journey with B-Raw, but I'm already very impressed by the projects I've edited. On top of that, surprisingly, both DaVinci Resolve and Premiere Pro have easily accepted the B-Raw footage, and playback on my MSI laptop is much smoother in B-Raw. My laptop now plays at full resolution with effects on like a champ. It's actually insane. File sizes have been somewhat of an issue, but nowhere near as crazy as ProRes sizes. I've found B-Raw Q5 compression to be the best all-round setting for me for file size and image quality on the camera. Here's a side-by-side example of graded videos with my older Lumix GH4 Vlog and the new Pocket 4K B-Raw. Now my lighting situation's not the best, so you can really see which is the best color codec here. Blackmagic as a company is really disrupting the film industry by putting cinema cameras and pro systems in the hand of micro-budget filmmakers. Not only filmmaking, but live productions too. The amount of products this company has is awesome. From ATEM switches to audio-video converters of every kind, capture and playback, routers, monitors, color grading hardware, and a whole lot more. When you buy a Blackmagic camera, you gain an included license to the Blackmagic post-production ecosystem, and this is really the golden ticket. I'm planning to do a whole video on my switch over from Premiere Pro to DaVinci because the topic and the gains in this area are huge. The MTF mount, or micro four thirds mount, on the Pocket 4K was a big selling point for me coming from the Lumix GH4 and also owning MFT lenses. I really love the idea of being able to put pretty much any lens on this cinema camera natively at a cheaper price point, like older primes with a vintage look or newer adapted lenses. Granted, you would also have that with say a GH5, but for me, already owning a Lumix GH4, that wasn't really an issue. A con you could easily bring up about the Pocket 4K is the amount of add-ons you need to actually make it function like a high-end working cinema camera. If you're buying the camera because it's relatively cheap, do take into account you'll likely be spending double the retail price at a minimum to get everything you need to shoot comfortably all day on this thing. But for me, that's not so much of an issue, as I'm actually really excited to be rigging up this camera. Building a custom camera rig is pretty much like Lego for adults, in that the creation becomes yours and it's totally suited to your shooting style, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all approach. The Micro Four Thirds sensor size can be a downside for some, as it does mean your image will be very cropped in, around 2.3 times crop compared to a full-frame censored camera. This can also get a bit confusing when trying to think in full-frame focal lengths. For example, my native MFT mount Lumix 12 to 35mm lens is actually more like a 24 to 70mm lens in a full-frame world, with the 2.3 times crop on the Pocket 4K sensor. The new Blackmagic Pocket 6K camera actually has a larger Super 35mm sized sensor, so that could be something to look at if you don't want to go down the Micro Four Thirds route. You'll also get a better depth of field for cinematic looking bokeh with a larger sensor. This is where a speed booster can come into play as well. For speed boosters, the only brand I would confidently recommend is Metabones. They are on the expensive side, and that's why I've put this as a con, but they do give you an extra stop of light, better depth of field for cinematic bokeh, plus a wider field of view of 1.6 times crop on your adapted lenses, to make your pocket camera into more like an APS-C size sensor camera. Another major con I should mention is autofocus. This camera does not have autofocus, so if you're shooting things like weddings and events, this may not be the camera for you. But if you're like me and you do love manual focusing and focus pulling, which most cinema short films do, then that shouldn't be so much of an issue. No inbuilt image stabilization is a big negative in a camera for a lot of people. To get silky smooth shots with the Pocket 4K, you'll need a gimbal, glide cam, or a heavy enough handheld rig that you won't get camera shake. I already have a GlideCam HD2000 and I'm planning to try the weighty handheld setup at first, so we'll see how that develops. But you could invest in a gimbal that can support the Pocket 4K like the Crane 3 down the track. In summary, I bought the Pocket 4K to become a better filmmaker. Despite the camera's obvious shortcomings, you can't look past the sheer quality of the image. With the right choices in lenses, filters, lighting, and composition, you're set up to get some incredible footage for the price. The rigging ordeal to come might be a turn-off for some, but for me, I'm loving seeing brands working together for a sick cinema setup that is actually pretty awesome. So I hope my experiences with this camera so far were somewhat helpful for making a purchasing decision. There are definitely quite a few major pros and cons to the Pocket 4K. Whether it got you pumped or turned you off this model, that's a good thing, as you're one step closer to that upgrade. If you have any questions, please hit me up in the comments, and if you did like this video, flick a thumbs up and a subscribe my way for more filmmaking related content. See you next time.